Hey kids, welcome to section 5.1, operations with functions. Today you're going to learn how to perform arithmetic operations with functions and how to apply arithmetic operations with functions. So a couple things that you need to remember from previous chapters is how to add, subtract, multiply, and divide functions. We're going to introduce some new notation today. Remember that a function looks like f of x. It can also look like g of x. And so when we write f plus g of x, that's like saying f of x plus g of x. We can also subtract functions f minus g of x, and that's just doing f of x minus g of x. We can also multiply functions together, f times g of x, and that's doing f of x times g of x. And then finally, division. You need to be a little careful here. When you do f divided by g of x, you need to remember that it's f of x divided by g of x and that you cannot have a denominator equal to 0. So if you have some kind of function in the denominator, you need to make sure that you account for whatever value would make that denominator 0 and then specify that you cannot have it. So let's see how we can use these rules. So example number 1, we're going to add and subtract functions. It says given that f of x equals x squared plus 5x minus 2, that's a quadratic, and that g of x equals 3x minus 2, that's a linear function, find each function. So part A wants you to find f plus g of x. Well, remember that that's f of x plus g of x. And so we're going to take the f function, which is x squared plus 5x minus 2, and we're going to add the g function, which is 3x minus 2. Then we're just going to collect like terms. X squared, 5x plus 3x is 8x, and negative 2 plus negative 2 is a negative 4. So when I add a quadratic and a linear, I get a quadratic. If I look at letter B, this time I'm going to subtract f minus g of x. Remember that that's f of x minus g of x. And so I'm going to take the f function, x squared plus 5x minus 2, and I'm going to subtract the g function, which is 3x minus 2. So then I'm going to collect my like terms. I don't have any other quadratic terms, so x squared. Then I have 5x minus 3x is 2x. And then I have negative 2 minus a negative 2. That's really negative 2 plus 2, which is 0. So notice that when I subtract a quadratic function and a linear function, I still end up with a quadratic. Okay, let's move on to multiplying and dividing. So let's take some new functions. So now our f of x function is x squared plus 2x minus 8, still quadratic. And our g of x function is x plus 4, still linear. And let's multiply the functions. So f times g of x, remember that's just f of x, times g of x. So we're going to take the f of x function, x squared plus 2x minus 8. And we're going to multiply it by the g of x function, x plus 4. So, sorry for that. So then I'm going to distribute. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 4 is 4x squared. Then I'm going to do the same thing with 2x. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times 4 is 8x. Then I'm going to distribute the negative 8 times the x is minus 8x. And the negative 8 times the 4 is negative 32. And I just have to clean it up and collect my like terms. I don't have any other cubic terms, so I'm going to put x cubed. Then I have 4x squared plus 2x squared, that's 6x squared. Then I have 8x minus 8x, those add to 0. And then I have minus 32. So notice this time when I multiplied a quadratic and a linear function, I ended up with a cubic function. Okay, finally, letter B, f divided by g of x. According to the rule, that's f of x divided by g of x. So I'm going to take my f function, x squared plus 2x minus 8, and I'm going to divide it by my linear function, x plus 4. Now there's a couple different ways you can simplify this. I cannot cancel the x's. I can't cancel the 4 into the 8. That doesn't work. what you could do is you could notice that the top can be factored. I can find two numbers that add to give me 2 and multiply to give me -8. So that's x plus 4 and x minus 2. And on the bottom we have x plus 4. And now look, I can cancel or simplify the x plus 4s, and I'm left with x minus 2. The only thing I have to be careful of is I need to make sure that I say that my x cannot be -4. If my x were -4, it would make this denominator equal to 0, which would make my whole problem burst into flames. Now, if you don't like factoring, you can always long divide. You can always use synthetic division in order to simplify that quantity. Okay, well, let's kick it up a notch. And instead of doing f plus g of x, we could do f plus g of a number. So let's look at some new functions. F of x is -x plus 1, that's linear. G of x is 4x plus 2, another linear function. And h of x equals x squared minus 1, that's a quadratic function. I'm going to be looking for 5f times h of -1. So this really means 5f of -1 times h of -1. So you're going to share the -1. Now, 5 times f of -1 means plug -1 in for x, get an answer, and then multiply everything by 5. So 5 times, go to your f function, I'm going to plug in a -1, and then I'm going to do the same thing for the h function. I'm going to plug in -1, -1 squared minus 1. All right, so let's see what this is. So we got 5 times, well, a -1 is a positive 1. And so that's 1 plus 1 is 2. So that gives me 10. On this other side, -1 squared is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. 10 times 0, I get 0. If we go over to letter B, I'm going to do g of 0 divided by 2 times h of 0. So that means plug 0 into the g function. So 4 times 0 plus 2. And on the bottom, we're going to do 2 times and plug 0 into the h function. So 0 squared minus 1. So that gives me 0 plus 2 on the top. 2 times 0 minus 1. So that gives me 2 on the top. 2 times a -1 on the bottom. 2 divided by -2. That gives me -1. So just be careful. There's lots of places where you can make small errors. So just watch your signs, watch your numbers. Okay, here's a word problem. Don't freak out. It's pretty easy. Amanda is planting flowers in a rectangular garden. All right, so let's draw a rectangle. She wants to know the amount of space in her backyard the garden will occupy. The length of the garden is represented by the function 2x plus 1, and the width of the garden is represented by the function x minus 2. What function represents the area of the garden? So I drew a little picture. I drew a rectangle, put in the length, put in the width, and it wants the area. Well, area of a rectangle is length times width. So all I have to do is take my length function, which is 2x plus 1, and multiply by my width function, which is x minus 2. This is just double distributing. So 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times -2 is minus 4x. 1 times x is x. 1 times -2 is -2. Combine like terms, 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. Easy peasy. There's no units, so I don't have to put any units on. All right. Ooh, this one looks fun. So now we have a big table. So basically, I have 3 functions, f, g, and h, and I've already substituted these 6 values in, and I've gotten the answers for each of those 6 for each of the 3 functions. I'm going to use the table now to find the sum, difference, product, or quotient of a few of them. So if we look at letter A, f plus g of -5, remember that's f of -5. plus g of negative 5. So I'm going to look at my table. I'm going to find f. I'm going to find negative 5. And so f of negative 5 would be negative 8. Then I'm going to add g of negative 5. So I'm going to find g. I'm going to find negative 5. And where they meet, 8. That means the sum is 0. If I do letter B, f minus g of 0, that's like doing f of 0 minus g of 0. So I'm going to find f. I'm going to find 0. So it's 3 minus g of 0 is negative 5. So that's really 3 plus 5, which is 8. Okay, if I do letter C, f times g of 3, so that's f of 3 times g of 3. So f of 3 is going to be 2 times g of 3, which is 0. 2 times 0 is 0. If I do letter D, g divided by f of negative 1, so that's g of negative 1 divided by f of negative 1. So g of negative 1 is negative 4, and f of negative 1 is negative 2, and that's 2. Okay, last one. Ooh, no table, no equations, but a graph. So notice we have the f function is this absolute value function. The g function is, I'm not really sure what kind of funky function that is. And h is a quadratic. So if I'm doing letter A, f of 2 plus g of 2. So remember, f of 2 is the y value that goes with an x value of 2. So find the f function, find 2, and so f of 2 would be negative 3. G of 2 would be find the g function, find 2, and then find the y value, which would be 2. So the answer is negative 1. Letter B would be h of 0 minus g of 0. So find the h function, find 0. It's 5 minus g of 0 would be 2. So that's 3. Letter C would be f of negative 3 times h of negative 3. Here's f. Here's negative 3. The answer is negative 4 times h of negative 3 would be 2. So that gives you negative 8. Letter D, g of 1 divided by f of 1. So g of 1 would be 0. F of 1 would be negative 2. And 0 divided by negative 2 is 0. All right, kids, that's section 5.1. If you have any questions, let me know. And as always, keep calm and keep trucking.